Emergency housing is getting a $300 million injection from the government. The money is to go to emergency housing places, more support for tenants and more frontline staff. The funding boost will be enough for an extra 1,400 places, with 600 in Auckland and the remaining 800 places in areas of high demand elsewhere. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, made the announcement this afternoon after Cabinet. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, was at the news conference and joins us now live from Parliament. Welcome to Checkpoint, as always, Jane. What are we looking at here? Is this new money, first of all, over and above what was announced in the budget?
This is all new money, John, but the one thing to note is out of the $300 million, $100 million of it, the large portion that's going to Housing New Zealand will have to be paid back. So the Minister said that is fiscally neutral, i.e. it's not going to cost the government anything in the long run. That will be over 10 years. But the other $200 million is new money, and that will basically be booked against the budget next year. For a little bit of a breakdown, the $100 million of that has to be paid back, will go to Housing New Zealand, and that's so that they can build, buy and lease properties. So actually getting the bricks and mortar for people to go into. There'll be $71 million for rental subsidies that they need to run those houses, and another $102 million that will go to community housing providers, and that's really to give people budgeting support and all of that sort of thing, and $10 million going to frontline Ministry of Social Development staff.
Right, so Jane, I'm looking through this as you go, as you say all that stuff. So the headline on the media release is government injects another $300 million to emergency housing. Then we find that they repay, Housing New Zealand will have to repay $100 million of it. The cost to Housing New Zealand of servicing the loan will be met from the rental subsidy stream. So there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors there. It's interesting to see. It does look like a slightly flat-footed announcement, doesn't it? That last paragraph, in addition to developing housing land on Crown land in Otahuhu, work is progressing on modular housing at 3 sites across Auckland. There's a slight sense of catch-up here. Does it feel that way?
Look, the Minister, when we asked her about that, said that this has been work that's been going on since late last year and into this year. And to be fair, I don't think you can just kind of magic up $300 million. I don't think Bill English would be too keen on that kind of carry on. So I do think there's been work put in here and due diligence, as the Minister said. But obviously the government, this is a political vulnerability for them, emergency housing, the whole issue of poverty. So no doubt they've been sharpening their pencils. In fact, the Minister, Paula Bennett, was asked whether this funding boost is an admission there is a housing crisis.
What it's saying is that there's most certainly challenges out there, and some of our most vulnerable feel them. As I say, central government hasn't been in this space before. We're the first government to step up and actually give them some certainty of funding. We have seen a demand and are unapologetic about stepping up and actually delivering for them.
So Jane, that was the Minister talking. Was she with the Prime Minister at post-Cabinet this afternoon?
That's right, she was. So they both came down. Mrs Bennett made the announcement, and then Mr Key was left to talk about other things like the US election. But how they're pitching this is it's a gap filler. So they have announced other money for emergency housing, for building social housing, and also through Housing New Zealand and other ways, as well as all of the other just general housing initiatives. But obviously this is a recognition or an admission that that is not happening fast enough for the people at the moment who are struggling to find houses. She specifically says this is to fill that gap until that housing comes on stream.
A big announcement that seems on the face of it to have come out of the blue. Is it unusual for such a big announcement to be made in this fashion?
Not necessarily. I mean, the government has its policy announcement plan that we obviously don't know about, but I think in this area, because there was also a significant amount of money in the in this year's budget, so I think this shows that this is an issue that the government does not feel it has under control, and it's obviously been working and taking maybe a more short-term approach in this announcement particularly, realising that as it goes through next year's election, if they're still facing criticism about their lack of response to emergency housing, that they're not doing anything to help people, it could really play against them, and that's only potentially a year away, and they don't necessarily have that long politically to let this issue get away from them.
Jane Patterson, our political editor, who was there at the announcement, which was made basically an hour ago. Thanks so much, Jane.